Since summer's here, a lot of people might be looking into getting a speaker. But if you're looking into getting a speaker to mainly use at your next cookout or to entertain guests with, then you'll probably be better off with a 360-degree speaker, aka a multi-directional speaker, because this way you're going to be able to blanket a large area with music without having to crank the volume up super high. So today we're going to be looking at three of my favorite multi-directional speakers. There's the brand new Marshall Stockwell 2, the UE Megaboom 3, which came out last fall, and the JBL Pulse 3, which is the oldest speaker here, but is still definitely super popular. Now, both the JBL Pulse 3 and UE Megaboom 3 have a retail price of $200. But they're typically on sale these days for around $150 to $170, whereas the Marshall Stockwell 2 is the newest speaker here and has a retail price of $250. But the Stockwell 2 is already going on sale for $200. So overall, all of these speakers are in the same price range, but they're very different from one another. But if you want to pick any of these speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to learn more about either of these speakers, please watch their full reviews. So, like I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for a speaker to use with friends or to take on the go with you, all three of these speakers are good options because they're all fairly durable. But I do have to admit that the JBL Pulse 3 is perhaps the most fragile speaker here. Even though this speaker has an IPX7 rating, meaning that it's waterproof, due to its acrylic top, if you do drop it, you do risk cracking it. Whereas since the UE Megaboom 3 has a fabric-covered body, it doesn't show any wear and tear. And the Stockwell 2 is also a very rugged speaker, but also consists of much finer materials like a hard rubberized body, a metal grille on both the front and back, and a great feeling built-in leather carrying handle with red velvet underneath. But technically speaking, the Megaboom 3 is the most durable speaker here because it has an IP67 rating, meaning it's both dust and waterproof, whereas the Stockwell 2 is only water resistant, so it can't get as wet. But the JBL Pulse 3 is perhaps the best looking speaker here because of its super impressive light feature. There are a whole bunch of different lighting modes to choose from, and through JBL's app, you can even customize the light feature. And this light feature is going to look awesome indoors or by the pool at night. But unfortunately, having this super awesome looking light feature on this speaker does severely affect its battery life. Even though the Pulse 3 has an advertised battery life of 12 hours, depending on what light mode you're using, you might be only able to get 5 hours of playback time out of it. So definitely the Pulse 3 is a speaker that you're constantly going to have to keep on the charger. And also keep in mind, the light feature doesn't look all that great in direct sunlight. But when it comes to battery life on both the Stockwell 2 and Megaboom 3, they both have an advertised battery life of 20 hours. And when they're both playing with the volume set at 80%, they're both good for about 8 to 9 hours of playback time. So both of these speakers aren't going to have a hard time lasting you a full day's cookout or get together. But when it comes to ports, that's when things get very different. The Stockwell 2 charges via a USB-C port, and you can also use this USB-C port to charge your own devices, whereas the JBL Charge 3 charges via a micro USB port. Now, the Megaboom 3 also charges via a micro USB port, but I do think it's important to point out that this speaker doesn't have an audio jack. You can only use it wirelessly. Personally, I don't mind it, but I do think it's important to point out. But when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, all of these speakers have stable connections just as you'd expect. And all of these speakers can be connected to at least 2 devices at the same time, so you and a friend can both be DJ. Again, we're trying to drive home this theme of entertaining guests with. But if you do plan on using these speakers on your own time, I do want to point out that the JBL Pulse 3 does have a slight latency to it whenever you try to watch videos on your phone, whether it's an Android or Apple device. It's a very slight latency, but if you're as particular as me, you will notice it. But also for my Android users, I do want to point out that the Stockwell 2 is the only speaker here that supports the aptX codec, whereas these other 2 speakers are only using the SBC codec. It's not a huge deal, but I did want to point that out. But more importantly, when it comes to speaker setups, that's when things start to get very interesting. Again, all three of these speakers are 360-degree speakers, but the way they go about it is very different. The Pulse 3 has 3 transducers all housed within the fabric portion of the speaker, and as a result, it does in fact evenly blanket an area with music, whether indoors or outdoors, and there are dual passive radiators that shoot out the top and bottom of the speaker. Then there's the Stockwell 2, which has a single woofer and dual tweeters that shoot music out the front and out the back of the speaker. And the Megaboom 3 has dual transducers and dual passive radiators that shoot out the sides of the speakers. But now we're going to jump into a sound test. All of these speakers are playing at the same loudness. The Megaboom 3 is playing with the standard EQ setting, and the Stockwell 2 is playing with the bass knob set to 8 and the treble knob set to 7.
But I don't know why you hit the road, but you don't realize I'm on the back when you're around. I'm walking twice when you're gone. Don't hesitate to call me back, 'cause I won't be there. I'm on the back when you're around. I'm walking twice when you're gone. Don't hesitate to call me back, 'cause I won't be there. I'm on the back.
So right off the bat, all of these speakers sound good, but if I had to single one out as the worst sounding speaker here, it would have to be the JBL Pulse 3. Personally, I think the vocals and mids are very shallow compared to these other speakers, and the soundstage and instrument separation isn't as good. Whereas the Stockwell 2 has a much wider soundstage, and the mids and highs are much crisper thanks to those dual tweeters. And then there's the Megaboom 3, which also has a decently wide soundstage and well-defined mids and highs. But I will admit the highs aren't as crisp because of the lack of tweeters. But keep in mind, both the Megaboom 3 and Stockwell 2 let you directly adjust your EQs. The Megaboom 3 has its app, and the Stockwell 2 has its bass and treble knobs. Whereas with the JBL Pulse 3, you can't change its EQ as easily. But overall, I do think the Megaboom 3 is the best performing speaker here because it doesn't just sound good, it also gets very loud. Whereas the Stockwell 2 doesn't get nearly as loud as the Megaboom 3 or Pulse 3. And if you're looking for a speaker to use mainly outdoors, then max loudness is definitely something you want to take into consideration. But finally, the last thing you want to take into consideration when choosing between these speakers is their speaker pairing protocol, just in case you decide to get more speakers in the future. Personally, I think JBL's JBL Connect Plus is the best one out there because it's the easiest one to use. You just press one button on each speaker and the speakers will figure out the rest by themselves. You don't have to open up any other apps and they establish a reliable connection very quickly. And also, JBL has a very wide range of JBL Connect Plus enabled speakers to choose from. Now, pairing multiple UE speakers is also very easy because you can just do so through their app, but it just isn't as fast as JBL's. And also, UE's lineup of speakers that support Party Up isn't as wide as JBL's. But finally, there's the Stockwell 2, which simply just can't be paired up to any other Marshall speakers. And personally, I do think that Marshall not having a speaker pairing protocol for their portable speakers is a huge drawback, because being able to pair multiple speakers together is a very standard feature these days. But overall, I think that if you're looking for a multi-directional speaker to use this summer, I think you can't go wrong with the Megaboom 3. It's a very good sounding speaker that gets very loud, but it's also super rugged, so you don't have to worry about it, and its battery life is gonna have no problem keeping up with you. And like I mentioned earlier, having a 360-degree speakers is great for entertainment purposes because you're able to blanket a large area with music without having to blast the volume. Now, the JBL Pulse 3 is also a good option, especially if you plan to use it at night, because it's gonna look awesome. But keep in mind, its battery life is really going to vary, so you're gonna have to keep a charger close by. And finally, there's the Stockwell 2, which is a good speaker in its own right, but I don't think it's for everyone, because it doesn't get as loud as these other speakers, and you can't pair it up to any other speakers. But if you're still not sold on a multi-directional speaker, and if you just want a speaker to really blast your music with, then you can also go with the JBL Extreme 2, which is now typically on sale for $200. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.